Hi everyone, Yasas que kalos irtate to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. This video has been highly requested on my Instagram stories when I do a lot of polls on there and ask questions about what recipes you guys want to see and things like that. And freezer prep was really high up there along with like 60-minute meals and 30-minute meals, which I will get to. Today we're going to be doing some freezer prep. We're going to be making things that freeze well. We're going to make a soup, desserts, two desserts, pastitsio and spanakopita. All these things freeze well. They are lifesavers when you have them in the freezer. Now, I know people are busy. I'm so busy. I know that you're busy. It is so nice to have things in the freezer that you can just pop in the oven on those days where you just don't have time and you don't want to order food from outside. You don't want to get dressed and go out to a restaurant. You just want to eat a home-cooked meal. Have these things on hand. Now, I take about one day out of the month or one day out of every other month, and I take about 3 or 4 hours or however long it takes to prepare as much as I can and just stock my freezer really well. It does save a lot of time, but you don't have to do that. A lot of these things, if you're making them anyway, just make a double batch. Make one extra batch for the freezer every time you're cooking if you have the extra time. It really doesn't take that much time if you're already making one particular dish, like a spanakopita. It just takes maybe an extra 10 minutes rather than doing the whole thing all over again on another day. Make double batches, get into that habit, freeze them. Things freeze so well most of the time, soups, pastries, a lot of things. We're going to start off today with a few recipes and I'll show you how I do them, and then you'll see how easy it is. And then if friends call and want to come over, you will not panic. The 15-20 minutes that it takes to clean up your house, you could put something in the oven and get a pot of coffee going. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking right now and we're going to get started with the bone broth. I love having bone broth on hand, especially this rich beef bone broth that we're going to make today. It doesn't have the Mediterranean flavors that you guys are used to on this channel. It has more of like an Asian flair because my kids love that, the ramen soups and the pho and all those types of things. So I wanted to give the broth that flavor so they can just add ramen to it or noodles or whatever, just eat it like that, and it's just nice and light and it goes well with everything. I'm using my Instant Pot. If you don't use an Instant Pot, you could still make this. It's just gonna take all day. It takes a long time to cook. I'm using beef cow feet. I know that sounds a little strange, but they are so rich in collagen and minerals. And once it cools, this looks like Jell-O. But if you're using the Instant Pot, like I said, it's going to be done in 3.5 hours or so. And in that time, I'm going to be done making all of the other things too. So we're going to begin with that. Let's go on over to the Instant Pot and get started. Okay, so I'm starting off with 4 pounds of, these are cow feet. And I just wash them really well. Then I don't end up skimming the broth while I'm making it, just because it makes it quicker to do it this way. So I'm using a little bit of vinegar and water. First, I'm just going to soak everything for a few minutes, and then I'm just going to rinse it out a few times with water, and then I'll put them in a strainer so that when I go to add them to the soup, they'll be nice and dry and clean. They're already pretty clean. My butcher does a really good job. These are so good. They're going to have so much marrow. It's going to make the broth really nice and gelatinous, which is what you're looking for when you're making a bone broth. That's why I love using just cow feet for this. You can definitely use chicken drumsticks and chicken feet, but it won't be as rich as this, but that is an option. So I like to use the Instant Pot to make the soup because it makes it so much quicker. Otherwise, it takes about 12 hours to make the soup. In the Instant Pot, it's done in under 4 hours. So I begin by setting the Instant Pot to the saute setting and put it on, make sure it's on high. So on the more, I guess it says more on mine, and I do set it for 30 minutes. It's not going to saute for 30 minutes, but once it heats up, then I'm going to go in and add the ingredients. So I have a whole onion that I've just cut in half. I left the skin on. These are organic onions. You can take the skin off if you want. A piece of ginger. It also has the skin on. You can peel it if you prefer. I just cut it in half. A head of garlic. I'm going to do the same thing. Try to put it face down if you can, otherwise it doesn't really matter. You want these to get sort of charred. So you just cook these on the saute setting for about 5 to 8 minutes, depending on how long it takes for your Instant Pot to do this, until they get nice and charred on the bottom. Then we're going to go in and add the spices. So next I have 1 star anise, 3 cloves, 2 bay leaves, and a heaping teaspoon of coriander seeds. The onions, they smell really good. It smells like they got a nice char on them. The garlic didn't, but the ginger kind of did. And the onion, let's try to get this up without burning myself. You can get it even a little bit darker than that, but I'll put the spices in here so they can toast for a minute or so. Be careful not to heat them too much. You don't want them to burn. Once that's done, we're gonna add the remaining ingredients. Oh, that's smelling so good. So now I'm gonna add the beef bones to this, about 2 teaspoons of salt, season it to taste. I'm also gonna throw some black peppercorns in there, about a teaspoon of them. I'm gonna add enough water so that way it reaches the max fill line in the machine. So whatever that is on your machine, do not go above that. Actually stay a little bit below it if you can. Then I'm just gonna add a couple splashes of Worcestershire sauce, however you pronounce this. About a teaspoon of it. And that's it. I'm gonna put the lid on and I'm gonna set it to pressure cook for 3 hours. Make sure that the vent is set to seal so that way it doesn't splatter all over the place once it starts pressure cooking. So while the beef broth is cooking in the Instant Pot, we're gonna move on and we're gonna make pastitsio. I'm gonna make 2 trays of pastitsio today. But one more thing about the beef broth, it is so high in collagen. I know collagen is all the rave today. Everybody's buying the powders. I've tried them myself. I've tried the powders for probably like 6 months, the recommended dose and even higher. And let me tell you that the results that you see from drinking a bowl of this bone broth every day do not come close. Like, it works so much faster than the powders. It's so much cheaper too. It's really good for your hair, skin, nails, teeth, bones, everything. Apparently, science is coming out with a lot of studies and saying that it's good, but you can really see results quickly if you're gonna have a cup of this a day. Plus, it's so comforting and good for you anyway, so keep this on hand. It freezes well. Not only does it freeze well, but it also keeps well in the refrigerator, so you don't even have to freeze it. If you know you're gonna eat it through the week, just keep it in the refrigerator. It really doesn't spoil if your refrigerator is at the right temperature. But let's move on to making pastitsio right now. I'm making 2 trays of pastitsio. One is gonna go in the freezer, the other one is gonna be dinner for tonight. Let's get started. All right, so while the beef broth is cooking, it's gonna take a while, we're gonna move on and we're gonna make the 2 trays of pastitsio. So I have 2 onions here that I finely chopped. I'm gonna add about a little over 1/4 cup, almost like 1/3 of a cup is what I go for. You could add as much as you like. I'm also gonna add a little pinch of salt. And I'm gonna cook the onions until they're nice and soft and golden over medium-high heat. That's gonna take about 8 or 9 minutes. Okay, so the onions are ready. Now I'm gonna add garlic. I always buy a big box of peeled garlic and I just puree it in my food processor and I keep it in a flat layer in freezer-safe bags because it's so much easier to use. So if you're grating fresh garlic, I would say about 8 to 10 garlic cloves, because we're doing a double batch today and we're gonna be using 4 pounds of ground beef. So just warm the garlic through. When you're using frozen garlic, make sure not to thaw out the whole bag. If you're freezing it like I do in freezer safe bags, I do it in a really thin layer so you can just break a piece off as much as you need while it's still frozen and just thaw that piece off. If you keep thawing it out, it's just gonna spoil. So keep it frozen and just break off the amount that you need and it thaws out super quickly. But as you can see, even when it's slightly still frozen, it just takes a few seconds to thaw out in the hot oil with the onions. So as soon as it thaws out and it's fragrant, you can go in and add the ground beef. That's 4 pounds of ground beef. You can use lean if you like. This is not lean. This is more like of an 80-20, 80% lean, 20% fat. Just break it up and warm it through. Once it's no longer pink, then you could add the remaining ingredients. Okay, honestly, that looks good enough to me. It's a lot of meat in there, so I'm not gonna wait until it's no longer pink. I'm gonna go in and add 2 teaspoons of salt, and I can add more later on. We'll start with that. Freshly cracked black pepper, as much or as little as you like. I would say half a teaspoon is a must, and then anything above that is a matter of personal preference. Then I'm adding some cinnamon. I used to not add it, but it just tastes so good in meat sauces. I'll do a teaspoon of cinnamon. You won't really be able to taste it, but it'll smell so good. Some crushed red pepper flakes. Those are optional. Add them if you like a little heat. If you don't, leave it out. A little bit of paprika, about a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons. It's up to you. It doesn't add flavor. It really just adds some nice color. Do not use smoked paprika. It's just gonna ruin the flavor. And then I'm gonna go in and add a 20-ounce can of diced tomatoes and all of their juices. You can puree this. I would have pureed it if I wasn't in such a hurry. I'm multitasking and doing so many things. So I'm just gonna cook the sauce a little bit longer until the tomatoes basically melt. We like our sauce a little more tomatoey. Traditionally, you would put half the amount of tomatoes in it for the amount of beef that's in here. But I like the tomato sauce to be in there, especially with the pasta. It's going to add lots of really good flavor. And I'm just going to cook this now for about 20 minutes or until it cooks down, maybe a little bit longer so that way the tomatoes melt. And then we'll add the oregano and the parsley later on. We'll also taste it to see if it needs more seasoning. While that's happening, I'm boiling some water over here for my pasta. I usually don't use a cast iron pot, but that's all I have right now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to boil 1 pack at a time just because it does not boil properly in this size pot to put in both packs of pasta, which is 2 pounds of pasta. I'm just going to do 1 pound at a time until it boils, and then I'm going to add it to the trays. So while the pasta is cooking in the back and the meat sauce is also cooking, I'm just going to grate my cheese. I have a little piece of casseri left. I have a piece of Parmesan. You can use just a kefalotiri, graviera, Gruyere, or all Parmesan. If you buy it already shredded, honestly, I would if you're doing freezer meals, because that's one less thing to do. It is time saving and you will barely taste the difference. But a tip when you're grating cheese is make sure that it's cold. So either straight out of the refrigerator, or you could even put it in the freezer for like about 15 minutes before you grate it. That's going to make it easier. It won't stick as much. And then when you're done grating, wash the grater with cold water, not hot. Okay, so once you have the pasta in the pans, I also like to add a cup of the pasta water in there. It just makes the pastitsio more juicy. So I'm going to add a little bit of the meat sauce to the pasta and then mix it all together. You could actually do half and half, like put all the meat sauce, half of it, because obviously there are 2 batches in each one, and just mix it with the pasta, or do it this way. I also put a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, and some oregano on the pasta so that it has lots of flavor. And I'm going to add a little bit of this cheese, like half a cup to a cup you can add. And now I'm just going to distribute the rest of the meat sauce evenly between the 2 trays. That smells so good. And I'm just going to spread the meat sauce over the pasta. I would have normally used 2 foil trays for this, but I'm going to bake one of these for the family for tonight because I don't have anything planned for dinner, and I'm just going to freeze one. You can freeze both of them, obviously, if you have dinner already planned for the evening. That looks good. I'm just going to quickly rinse this pot off and make the bechamel sauce for both pans in the same pot. Okay, so since we're making a double batch of the bechamel sauce, we're going to use 1.5 cups of olive oil and then 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. So whisk that together and cook it over medium heat until it's toasted. That's going to take about 2 or 3 minutes or so, maybe less. You want to get rid of that raw flour taste from this. Okay, next we're going to add 10 cups of whole milk to this. It can be cold. Whisk it all together until the flour has dissolved into the milk. And then go ahead and season it with a little bit of nutmeg. I would do no more than about 1/4 or maybe 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'm really careful with nutmeg because the strong flavor and too much really ruins it. Some black pepper and a little bit of salt. Don't go too heavy on the salt because it's going to get lots of cheese. Continue to whisk it and cook it over medium heat until it comes to a boil and it thickens. Okay, while that's happening, off to the side, you're going to need 4 whole eggs. My recipe calls for 4 egg yolks, but I'm just going to use 2. Save the egg whites for cookies or something like that. I'm just going to use 2 because eggs are super expensive these days and they're actually hard to find. And I have made this with fewer eggs and the recipe works. If they're not hard to find where you are, go ahead and use the full 4 egg yolks for this recipe. Beat the eggs together until they're fluffy and then add some of the hot cream mixture to the eggs to temper them, to raise their temperature, and beat that together. And then go ahead and add it to the sauce off of the heat. Mix it all together and then add the cheese in. And then just go ahead and divide the sauce between the 2 pans. I also went ahead and I sprinkled a little bit of cheese over the meat sauce. Okay, so once the pastitsio comes out of the oven, you want it to cool completely before it goes in the freezer. Never put hot trays in the freezer. Things will go bad. It's not going to work out. Let it come to room temperature and then cover it with foil. You could even double wrap this with some plastic wrap if you want. They will keep fresh in the freezer for 2-3 months, literally. You don't have to worry about it. Just make sure that you label everything. So you could just write over the foil if you're using foil. write what the dish is. In this case, it's pastitsio. Write the date on there in case you make more later on. So that way you can use the older ones first. And then you can freeze it. When it comes to cooking this, you want to thaw this overnight in your refrigerator. Otherwise, it's going to take forever. You can definitely bake it in the oven, but it's going to take a really, really long time. If you thaw it out, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then bake it in there until it warms through. It's already cooked, so it's going to take about 45 minutes or so, maybe less, 30 minutes, depending on your oven. Just keep an eye on it, and once it's nice and hot, take it out of the oven and serve it to your family. I know that I'm using foil trays today, like I said before, and like I said on my Instagram stories. I know that there are healthier options out there when it comes to trays. You can use ceramic trays, which I don't recommend because if you ever take a ceramic tray from freezer to a hot oven, it can and will crack. Ceramic doesn't do good with drastic temperature changes, so keep that in mind. Neither does glass. Stainless steel works well, but I don't have that many stainless steel trays. I have these aluminum trays that are disposable, and they are going to have to work, so that's what I'm using. Now we're going to move on, and we're going to make the spanakopitas. I'm making 2 spanakopitas today. Spanakopita freezes so well, and it is one thing that you can definitely take straight from the freezer and put into your oven, and you can bake it frozen. Of course, you can thaw it out overnight if you want it to cook a little bit faster. But let's get started anyway, and we'll go over those instructions at the very end. All right, so now we're going to make 2 spanakopitas for the freezer. Spanakopita is something that freezes beautifully, stays fresh for 2 to 3 months, so you can make many of these and keep them in your freezer. So I usually use 2 packs of ricotta cheese, almost a pound each pack, about 15 ounces. But I found many times when I was low on ricotta cheese, I substituted cream cheese, so 8 ounces, half a pound. Works really well. So I'm doing 1 little bar, an 8-ounce bar of cream cheese and 15 ounces of ricotta cheese. Full fat ricotta cheese is what you need. Full fat cream cheese. Low fat stuff, if you use it and it doesn't come out right, I don't want to hear about it. 6 eggs. If you want to cut the eggs, you could probably get away with 4 for 2 of these. I'm also going to add some freshly ground black pepper, about half a teaspoon, a teaspoon, whatever you like. Dried dill. So if you have fresh dill, you can go ahead and finely chop up about half a cup of fresh dill. Dry dill, you need much less. So for 1 batch of spanakopita, it's 3 teaspoons of dill. Since we're doing 2, we're going to do 6 teaspoons. And I'm going to put 1 heaping teaspoon of salt. The rest of the salt is going to come from the feta cheese. I'm going to attach the flat beater to this. You can do this by hand with a big bowl and a whisk, and then just use your hands to mix it all together. But if you have a mixer, it's going to make life so much easier. And then about 7 to 8 tablespoons of olive oil. And you're just mixing this until everything is combined, nothing fancy. Then I have scallions. I've finely chopped 3 bunches of scallions. The recipe calls for 1 bunch for each one, so we would need 2, but I did 3 because I have a bunch of scallions in my fridge and I don't want them to go bad. And scallions just taste so good in this. An extra bunch does no harm, but if you only have 2 bunches, that's really all you need. I like to take the ends of the scallions, especially if they have the roots attached, and put them in a cup with a little bit of water, and I put it on my windowsill, and the scallions grow like magic. They grow so fast. Follow me on Instagram, and I share all these tips on my stories. I also save them so that way you can check them out in the highlights. Next, I'm going to add the spinach. So we need 2 pounds of spinach. Each bag that I have here, this has already been triple washed and all that good stuff, so I'm not washing it again. You can definitely wash it at home if you want to, and then just spend extra time drying it. When I'm making freezer meals, I take all the shortcuts that I can get because that's the whole point of making these meals. But whatever you feel comfortable, you go ahead and do that. I'm going to add 1 bag in here first. And then if the other one fits, I'll put it in here. If you have a mixer that's smaller than this and it doesn't take all of the spinach, or if your mixer is this big and it doesn't take all of the spinach, you can just roughly chop it and just mix it in the big bowl later on. Okay, so I'm not going to push it. It looks like that's all the spinach is going to take. It took 1 whole bag and a little bit of another one. I'm just going to mix everything else in a big bowl. Just going to very roughly chop it, add it in. And I don't even have all of the spinach in here, but I'm going to begin crumbling my feta cheese. 2 pounds of feta is what you need. Just crumble it in there. And this is honestly extra unnecessary work. You can just make 1 batch at a time in your mixer, and it's going to save you a lot of hassle. You will not have to do what I'm doing over here. And that's it. The filling is finally ready. I'm just gonna clean up a little bit over here and we're gonna put it all together. Over here I have 6 sticks of butter that I've melted. That is 1.5 pounds. If I end up needing more deliciousness to put on my phyllo, basically, I'm just gonna use some olive oil instead of melting more butter. You can use all olive oil for this if you like olive oil better. So I have my 2 trays over here and I'm just gonna line them. These are 9 by 13 inch trays, by the way. They're usually sold as like lasagna pans or something like that. I have some panko breadcrumbs. This is another step that you can either do or leave out. Some people don't like the texture that breadcrumbs leave on the bottom of the spanakopita, but what they do, they soak up all that moisture and they make the bottom layers of phyllo way crispier than if you were to leave it out. So if you leave it out, keep that in mind and it just won't be as crispy. It'll still be good, trust me. I have 2 packs of number 4 phyllo. These thawed out overnight in my refrigerator. And then I left them on the counter for a couple of hours and they are going to be easy to work with now. So I'm gonna use some for the bottom and some for the top. I've already done a spanakopita video. I've done so many actually. You can make whichever spanakopita you want with this. I'm just making the traditional one because it's easy and it's quick. If I had more time, I would make little triangles because it's just easier to bake those off. You don't have to bake them all off at the same time and you'll have them for a little longer. Okay, so you're gonna use a few layers of phyllo at a time, like 2 layers at a time, and then drizzle butter over them. Okay, so you're gonna need 2 packs of phyllo, 1 for the bottom and 1 for the top. Now I'm gonna take half of this filling and I'm gonna use my clean hands to do this and put half in one pan and half in the other. You can use a spatula. Just spread it in so that way it's in one even layer. So I'm using these trays, again, I said they're 9 by 13 inch lasagna pans, but if you want to get more slices for your time and the same amount of ingredients, use one of these baking trays. These are half sheet baking pans. You would need 2 of them, obviously. They're also aluminum, so I don't know about the health aspect of it, but they can go from freezer to oven without breaking on you. Now, I'm gonna open the next pack of phyllo and I'm gonna make the top of it. So I'm gonna show you 2 ways to do it. You can do one with a beautiful, decorative, fancy crinkle top. It's gonna bake up and it's gonna be much crispier. Or you can do it just the way we did and layer one on top of the other. For the crinkly effect, you're gonna take 2 sheets at a time and you're just gonna gather them so that way they look kind of like an accordion, and then you put them on top of the spanakopita. You could do 1 sheet at a time if it's looking like you might run out of phyllo. I don't think I'm gonna run out of phyllo. I think there's more than enough here for both pies. And I'll just do 1 for the end, just like that. Tuck them in. You could even wet your hands and tuck them in so that way they really go in. Otherwise they start to dry out and crack. So there's one way to do it. The other way to do it, you still take 2 layers at a time just like you did before, and you just layer them on top the boring way. But it is kind of quick. I guess the other way is quicker. I don't know, this way takes a little more time if you ask me. Definitely doesn't have the same effect, doesn't look as pretty. Okay, and then you take the ends and you just tuck them in and kind of gather them up to make it look more rustic. And then with this one, you would have to cut it into whatever serving size pieces you're going to be serving it in. So usually you get 12 pieces out of a tray this big. You don't cut all the way down to the bottom. And then you get all of that butter in there. Not all of it because we're dividing it into 2 trays, between 2 trays I mean. And then this one, we're not going to score this. There's no point. You won't be able to see them. Just go ahead and drizzle that butter on top. You see how there's a white layer underneath the oil? Those are milk solids, so you can clarify the butter if you care about that. What they do, once this bakes, it kind of makes darker spots on your phyllo. It's not a big deal for me, but if you want to, you can just skim the butter off the top and take the milk solids out. You can use it in cakes and stuff. I don't mind, I put it on top of there. If you want to, you can sprinkle some sesame seeds on top of this, but that's it. These are ready for the freezer. So once the spanakopita is done, at this point, once it's assembled, you do not bake this. You want to put this in your freezer unbaked so it can taste really fresh. Just cover it tightly with aluminum foil. Again, you can go over that with some plastic wrap and make sure to label it with the name of the dish, which is spanakopita, and the date, so that way you know when you made it, in case, again, like if you make more later on, you use the older ones first. When it comes time to making this, if you want to make it straight out of the freezer, of course, take the plastic off first, but leave the foil on. Make sure your oven is preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Bake this covered for an hour, then remove the foil and bake it for another hour, hour and 20 minutes until it's nice and golden and perfectly cooked through. It depends on your oven. My oven took, I think, an hour and a half uncovered for it to bake, but I did keep it at 350. I didn't raise the temperature because I wanted all of the layers to cook through. And just look at how crispy it is. Look at how perfectly cooked it is. It's not at all watery or anything like that. I know that is a concern when you freeze spinach and things like that. Will it become watery? As you can see, it's not watery at all. It's perfectly crispy, perfectly cooked through, ready to be served. So that's it. This will stay, the spanakopita, like I said, will stay fresh for about 3 months in your freezer. I promise it won't last that long once your family knows it's in there. And now we have time to make dessert. So for dessert, I'm gonna make 2 desserts. Since I'm using phyllo and butter today, we're gonna make galaktoboureko rolls. Galaktoboureko is a Greek custard pie. I've made these rolls on the channel way a long time ago. So we're just gonna go over it again today. Basically, it's phyllo that's nicely buttered up and crisp once it's baked. And inside, there's a delicious custard that's in there that's scented with orange. It's made with semolina flour, so it's a little bit heartier than a regular custard. They're so delicious. And again, these also freeze for up to 2 to 3 months in your freezer. We're also gonna make Nutella rolls, Nutella baklava rolls. I know I made them the other day when I was making something on the channel and I had some leftover phyllo. I'm just gonna make some more because I love to serve these with coffee. They're so delicious. Everyone loves them. So we're gonna make those 2 today. Let's get started. Okay, so we're gonna begin with the galaktoboureko rolls. And in my pot over here, I have 3 cups of whole milk. Here I have 1 egg yolk. And I'm gonna put the milk on the stove in a second. But let me get the other eggs in here. 2 eggs, so 2 whole eggs and 1 egg yolk to make the custard. A half a cup of granulated sugar. So most of the sugar is going to go in the eggs, but half of it, so a quarter of a cup, is going to go in the milk. And I'm going to put it on the stovetop until it's steaming hot. The sugar is going to keep the milk from sticking to the pot. That's a nice tip that I learned from a pastry chef. The remaining sugar is going to go with the eggs. Then we need 1 tablespoon of cornstarch and a quarter of a cup of fine semolina flour. I buy my semolina flour from my local Middle Eastern food market, and I put it in a Ziploc bag and I keep it in the freezer. That way it stays fresh for a long time. And then I'm gonna add the zest of an orange to this. You can leave the orange out and substitute lemon for it, or leave the citrus out altogether. It just perfumes the custard and I love it, so that's why I add it. And a little pinch of salt, about a quarter teaspoon or so is all you need. Just whisk that all together until it's smooth. And once the milk is steaming hot, we're gonna temper this mixture. Tempering means we're gonna raise the temperature of the eggs, so that way when they're added back to the milk, it creates a custard and not scrambled eggs. All right, so you just pour some of the steaming hot milk in the egg mixture, and then you just whisk it all together, pour it back into the pot, and then you put it over the heat and you cook it, and do not step away from it at this point. Keep stirring it with the whisk so that way it doesn't stick or burn, and just cook it once it comes to a boil. And as soon as it thickens, you take it off of the heat, and then it's ready to be put together. All you do is add a splash or 2 of vanilla extract, like 2 teaspoons I would say, and then the custard part is ready. That's really all you have to do, but keep an eye on it, because if you step away from this and it burns, it's gonna taste horrible and you're gonna have to start all over, and then you've wasted all those ingredients. All right, so I have a pound of phyllo. This is number 4 phyllo, the one that we make baklava with. I've melted 4 sticks of butter, which is 1 pound, but I only need half of this, maybe a little bit less. Make sure that you thaw out the pastry in the refrigerator overnight, and then you leave it on the counter for at least an hour before you work with it. And then I have 2 baking trays that are lined with parchment paper. If you have everything ready to go, it moves really quickly. So you're gonna take 1 sheet at a time, drizzle some butter on it, fold it over, drizzle a little bit more butter down the center. Then you're gonna take a tablespoon and a half of the custard and put it right here on the bottom. Fold the sides over, but don't fold them in too much, otherwise it won't be wide enough. And then you roll it up. That's it, that's how you get a roll. And keep doing these until you run out of either phyllo or custard. But this is going to make about 23 or so. I'll tell you how many I have once I'm done. All right, so next I'm going to be making some Nutella baklava rolls. You can use Nutella, you can use your favorite chocolate hazelnut spread. It doesn't have to be the same brand. Whatever you love, whatever you have will work for this. Chocolate ganache also works. You can put some nuts in it, like hazelnuts or sliced almonds. You know, you can get creative with this or keep it as simple as just the way we're going to make it right now. You take one sheet at a time, just like we did for the galactobureko rolls. And you fold it in half, and if it breaks, it's really not a big deal because we're going to roll it up anyway. And then take a heaping teaspoon of the chocolate and put it on the bottom. Also drizzle some butter and always focus on the top. That's going to help seal it. Roll the sides over just a little bit because you want this to be wide. And then you roll up. And even the parts that are broken, they're going to be hidden later on. You see this? And there are about 23 sheets of phyllo in each pack of number 4 phyllo pastry. So that's how many we're going to get out of this. So once you assemble the rolls, go ahead and brush them with the butter and lay them on the trays. Once they're on the trays, you want to freeze them, okay? Don't bake them. You want to freeze them right away. And when they're frozen solid, you could do one of two things. You could leave them on the trays like that, which I don't really recommend unless you're going to bake them all off, like for a party or something like that. What I like to do is I like to transfer them to freezer-safe bags, like a Ziploc bag. I label the bag, and then I take that same parchment paper that they were sitting on, I just fold it, and I reuse it whenever I bake them. So that way you don't waste anything, and you have everything nice and ready in that Ziploc bag. Make sure to label the bag with what's inside of it. In one of the bags, we have the chocolate rolls, the chocolate Nutella baklava rolls, and the other one, we have the galactobureko rolls, the custard rolls. And that way you know what it is, because once they're frozen, everything looks the same. Trust me. You're going to think you're going to know what it is, what it's going to be, but when you go there and you open the freezer, literally they look the same. You can't really see inside unless you pick on it. Keep everything nice and neat and organized. It's going to make life so easy for you. You can bake these straight out of the freezer. You take them out, put them on a tray that's lined with parchment paper. They're already buttered and everything like that. You just put them on the tray in the preheated oven. You're going to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're going to bake them until they're nice and golden. It's going to take about 40 minutes. When they're not frozen, they take about 30 minutes or so. They might take 45 minutes when they're frozen. I don't remember. Just keep an eye on them. When they're nice and golden, you take them out and then you pour that delicious syrup on top. The syrup recipe is going to be on the blog. It's the same simple syrup that we use for almost all the baklava and these like rolls. So it's very simple to make. You can make that ahead of time too, a week ahead of time, a few days ahead of time, and keep it in a glass jar in the refrigerator. It stays fresh. And you can use it in smoothies and things like that too. So it's good to have on hand. I usually have some on hand because I always make syrupy desserts and I like to have it ready. If you want to skip the syrup, you can add a little bit more sugar to the custard. I know it has half a cup of sugar. You could add maybe 3/4 of a cup of it. And then instead of doing the syrup, which I love, you can just dust them with powdered sugar. That's an option. Powdered sugar and maybe a little bit of cinnamon. That's really delicious too. It's up to you. You can do half and half and see which one you like more. So these are all done. Now we're going to strain off the soup. Once the soup is done cooking, I like to pressure cook it for 3 to 3.5 hours, just so that way all of that collagen that's on the bones literally melts off into the soup. I don't like the rubbery texture of it, so I like for it to be totally melted so it's easy to eat. I like to let the Instant Pot naturally release. I don't release the pressure because it just makes a huge mess. I just leave it. It takes about 30 or 40 minutes. Once the pressure is released and the little thing goes down, you can remove the lid and then you could wait for it to cool down a little bit so it's easier to handle. And then what I like to do is I like to take a big bowl. I have some stainless steel mixing bowls that I like to use for this. And then I put a strainer inside of it, or a colander, and then I use another strainer on top of that to kind of catch the fine things that are in the soup. And I take out as many of the bones as I can. First of all, I pass everything through the 2 strainers. And I take out the big bones that are pretty bare at this point, and I throw those away. Of course, I throw away the onion and the garlic and all of that stuff. however many of the coriander seeds and cloves and things that I can get, I get rid of those. Otherwise, I don't really worry too much about them if they end up in my soup, unless I'm serving it at a dinner party, but this is strictly for our family, so it's fine if there are some of those in there. Then I like to transfer it into either a big bowl. If I know they're going to have this throughout the week, I'm just going to refrigerate it and put the whole thing in a big bowl. My kids are not fans of the bones and the things around the bones. They like more of the clear soup, which still has lots and lots of collagen in it. So I'm just going to separate it into two bowls, one bigger bowl with some of the bones in there, and the other one that's just the clear broth that's strained and nice and clean and clear. And then I'm going to let it come to room temperature and refrigerate it. Of course, you can freeze this. You can put this in freezer-safe containers, and it'll stay fresh in your freezer, again, for 2 to 3 months. Take it out when you need it and warm it on your stove. You can add some thinly sliced steak slices to this. Once you're warming it up, it only takes about 2 or 3 minutes. Ramen noodles, pho noodles, season it with a little bit of salt, maybe sriracha or something like that. So comforting and good. Tastes even better than anything you'll get at a restaurant. I know that for sure. I hope you guys give all of these recipes a try and let me know what you think. Let me know what you like to make ahead and freeze in the comments down below. And if you want more videos like this, also post in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Yes, us.